is the third largest country in South America, after Brazil and Argentina. To give you an idea of its size, think of it as twice the size of our state of Texas, covering 500,000 square miles with a population of 20 million people, half of which live in the jungle, which accounts for nearly two-thirds of the land. Its capital city is Lima, located on the west coast of the country. Lima is not exactly a traveler's paradise. Your first impression is that of a huge, rather ugly city blanketed under a perpetual sea of smog, and people who live in this unhealthy atmosphere never see blue skies. The city was built in a huge dry valley which traps the heavy gray air. This, with the uncontrolled pollution from millions of cars, make breathing very difficult, to say the least. The people seem to have adjusted to the smog, the people who live here, that is, but for the visitor, it's best to avoid going out during the rush hours. And when the rush hours are, well, you'll have to decide, because Lima is a city that never sleeps. Union Street is the most interesting of the hundreds of downtown streets, and it's filled with vendors, money exchangers, and just people who seem to have nothing better to do than wander around. As in most South American cities, you can usually do better exchanging your U.S. money for the Peruvian currency, the Inti, with a black market person. Now, supposedly it is illegal, but you'll never see the sellers being hassled by police or anyone else. There are three fairly good hotels in Lima. The Bolivar is the oldest and most elegant of those hotels, but it is not in the safest of areas for visitors. It is in the heart of the city, near St. Martin's Monument and the Plaza of San Martin, the liberator of South America in the early 19th century. Because so many of the people are so very poor and work for the unskilled is almost impossible to find, they have little to do and pass some or most of their time in the plaza, where the entertainment is free. Circles gather around salesmen hawking everything from snake oil to shrunken heads. The Plaza de Armas is the other big square of the city, surrounded by government buildings, including the Presidential Palace. The changing of the guards is a daily event that used to attract a lot of visitors, but no more. Because of the very distinct possibility of danger to the president, tourists or locals are not allowed close enough to the palace to watch this ceremony. But nonetheless, the soldiers perform their daily ritual with precision and pride. Only a very few guests are allowed the privilege of watching the guards parade, and these visitors are thoroughly investigated and searched before being allowed to get this close. School children don't seem to pose a big threat. They receive preferential attention. There really aren't a lot of things for visitors to see and film in Lima. Even the Torre Tagle Palace, which was at one time open to the public, now is only looked at from the outside. We are granted a rare glimpse inside. The Torre Tagle Palace was a private residence built in 1735, finally restored in 1958. It is an excellent example of Spanish colonial architecture, and these days it houses city and provincial offices. The Torre Tagle Palace. 1 block west of the Plaza de Armas are the church and monastery of the Dominican friars built in 1549, Santo Domingo. For 45 years, this was the home to Saint Martin de Porres. He served as barber and pharmacist to the friars, but was never permitted to become a priest because he was black. Now, he is a saint. Near St. Martin's Shrine are the remains of Lima's other famous saint, Saint Rose of Lima. Saint Rose was the first saint from the New World. The tiles depict the Spanish Inquisition and were placed here in 1606. Several levels below the main chapel of Santo Domingo, a priest is restoring a 16th century statue of Christ. It has been painted over many times over the centuries and is currently being restored to its original colors. You can see the 7 layers of paint. This restoration will take about 3 years to complete. In Lima's cathedral, one learns the story of the founding of the city by Francisco Pizarro. Here you'll find beautiful mosaics and paintings describing Pizarro's conquest. If you're lucky, you'll find someone who speaks English to tell you the story. As the conquistadors sailed south from Panama, the landmass of South America was on their left and the Pacific on their right. In this 16th century map, the Strait of Magellan is on the top and the north is shown at the bottom. King Charles V controlled most of Europe by the age of 20. He maintained an unflagging interest in New World colonization. An old map in the shape of a woman shows the body of the woman as Europe and the head as Spain, suggesting Charles' immense power over all of Europe. Among the many adventurers interested in the New World, 3 are especially prominent: Father Luke, Diego de Almagro, and Francisco Pizarro. An early sketch shows the priest blessing de Almagro and Pizarro as they depart for Peru, even though they never actually left together. Actually, they never were close friends at all. It was Pizarro who captured the Inca chief Atahualpa and gained control over the Inca people. The Incas were very intelligent and peaceful and thoroughly taken by surprise. The Spanish treated them harshly and made them their slaves. An Incan fortress built on a hilltop above Cusco is shown in an 8th century watercolor with an old drawing of the city itself from the time of Pizarro and his small group of soldiers as they named Cusco the first capital of Peru. And here, in the main cathedral of Lima, lie the mortal remains of Peru's most famous or infamous citizen, depending on your heritage, Francisco Pizarro. Even if you're not one who enjoys visiting churches, You're sure to find something of interest in the architecture of these cathedrals of Lima. I'm always struck by the richness of these churches of South America. Quite a contrast to all the poverty outside the walls. These treasures have been lovingly guarded over the centuries and instill a sense of pride in the people who come here to worship. The Church of San Pedro was built in the early 1600s. And the most outstanding feature of the Church of San Pedro is the choir loft with its priceless hand-carved representations from the Bible. The Church of St. Francis may be the most fascinating on your tour, especially behind this door. 3 floors beneath the monastery, we find the catacombs, where thousands of skulls and bones are eerily at rest. No one knows exactly who these people were, or exactly where they were from. Church records have been destroyed, and the catacombs remain a great unsolved mystery of St. Francis. Right above the catacombs, the present-day Church of St. Francis, with its 15 chapels. And lovely, peaceful courtyards. From the very old Peru, let's visit the very modern Peru. And the Hotel Crillon, the second of the 3 major hotels. The Crillon is in the downtown area, features fine restaurants and a wonderful folklorico show each night with dancers from every region of Peru. These shows are free of charge, a public service of the Crillon, helping to maintain the rich heritage of the native people by displaying the original folk dances passed from generation to generation. One of the favorites of those dances features a very unusual musical instrument. The musical instrument known only as the Thing. And the Come On Baby Light My Fire dance is also a great favorite with the crowds. There are some very lovely areas in Lima and some very beautiful homes, especially in the San Isidro and Barranco districts. Barranco is scattered with old mansions and fascinating smaller homes. Now, this area was Lima's seaside resort. The home of Sea Captain Juan Almagro is now a maritime museum. There's a little specific to see, but it's a delightful escape from the crowds of the city. And one of the charming places to see or cross is the old wooden Bridge of Sighs. It's said that if two sweethearts cross the bridge before sunset, a night of romance is sure to follow. The Colonel and his chickens are found worldwide, and Lima's Miraflores district is no exception. Without a doubt, Miraflores is the loveliest part of Lima. Actually, it's a small, elegant city in itself. Avenida Largo ends in a pleasant little park where balloon sellers and street artists offer their wares. The best time to visit is after 4 p.m. when the shops have reopened after the long lunch break, and folks come in their best casual attire to shop and meet their friends. Here you'll find little boutiques with plenty to tempt the shop-till-you-drop person. An American woman has a very popular shop here in Miraflores' Alamo Shopping Center with some distinctive and unusual items for sale. A couple of stuffed llamas mark the entranceway. One of the museum-like articles for sale is a colorful portable altar that priests of yesteryear would take from village to village where there were no churches. The priests used the scenes depicted on the altar to explain biblical stories to the local people. Well, after a busy day exploring the many shops in Miraflores, the Safari restaurant offers a quiet lunch in a very elegant and exotic surrounding. This is certainly one of Lima's finest dining establishments. Speaking of food, on the coast of Peru, seafood is the specialty, whereas mountain food is more basic with rice and potatoes and a little meat. The Incas introduced to the New World over half of our known food supply. Foods we enjoy today, like corn, potatoes, peanuts, strawberries, and avocados, were first introduced in Peru. Whether meeting for business or pleasure, you're sure to enjoy an outing here. Close by is the Gold Museum. Of all the points of interest in Lima, this is the most visited, for here, you're told, is to be found under one roof more gold than anywhere else on earth. It is a private museum, and all of the displays are either pure gold or have something to do with the precious metal. Approximately 6,500 pieces of worked gold, bowls, cups, and ceremonial objects are found here. One awe-inspiring glimpse of such wealth, and you will undoubtedly regret that European greed melted down indiscriminately other great works of art, such as gold and silver Incan statues from Cusco. What remained, the pieces collected here, was what were small enough to be overlooked by the Spanish. This is the Museo del Oro, the Gold Museum of Peru. Not made of gold, but solid bronze, are these llamas, which you'll find outside the third of Lima's 3 best hotels, the Sheraton. Condor Travle is located in the Sheraton, and I found the staff here the most friendly and knowledgeable of any I visited in Peru. They can help the adventurous plan some great visits to some unexpected and fascinating places in mysterious Peru. One of the areas currently being touted by the Peruvian Tourist Bureau is Arequipa and the Colca Canyon, some 800 miles from Lima. An active city with a population of over 750,000, with El Misti, a dormant volcano poised above, the place does have a rather legendary sort of appearance. It's called the White City because of the white volcanic sillar cut from the surrounding mountains. The sillar is used like adobe in building some of Peru's loveliest architecture. The Incas were not alone in finding Arequipa to their liking. When Pizarro officially founded the city in 1540, he was moved enough to call it Villa Hermosa, beautiful town. And despite a disastrous earthquake in 1687, it's still endowed with many of the country's finest colonial churches and mansions. Arequipa, at 7,500 feet above sea level, is one of the few places in the world where eternal springtime reigns. Temperatures vary between 54 and 70 degrees throughout most of the year, except for 2 or 3 very hot summer months. And the city, unlike Lima, rarely sees a day without a few hours of brilliant sunshine. Adolfo Castle is open to tourists year-round. The Plaza de Armas is among the most beautiful central city squares in all Peru. The city grew around this plaza in 1540, and today you can enjoy the square, which hasn't changed much in all the centuries since its concept. Besides its trees and pretty fountain, the plaza is alive with the constant flow of people taking a short rest on one of its many benches, or maybe conducting business of one kind or another. The revolving door that allows things to be brought from behind the walls to in front without ever seeing the sender is just one fascinating part of Santa Catalina Convent. This place was considered heaven by many wealthy Arequipan Catholic parents, and perhaps hell for many second-born daughters. The second girl child was born to castigate herself in order to save the souls of sinners, or so many Catholics believed. From the time of her infancy, the second daughter was groomed for her future life in Santa Catalina. When the girl reached the age of 14, if her parents had enough money, she was admitted to the Santa Catalina Order of the Carmelite nuns. Her parents would present lavish gifts to the convent, hoping to ensure their daughter's residency. Once accepted, the girl would be permitted to bring with her 2 servants who would remain with her for the rest of their lives. They would be allowed to leave the convent only to attend to the convent's needs, but the girl herself would never be seen again by her family or anyone except her fellow sisters. It may seem impossible for us to imagine such an existence, but for these people, it was about as close to sainthood one could get while still being alive. Whether the second daughter really wanted the life or not, she was groomed for her destiny from her infancy. Near an area called the Orange Tree Cloister, a series of paintings show the soul evolving from a state of sin to the achievement of God's grace, a constant reminder of the Holy Spirit's permanent existence according to early Carmelite beliefs. Nuns still live here today, but they are restricted to special quarters and are never permitted to be seen. It's fascinating wandering the twisting streets and letting your imagination run wild, thinking about what it must have been like here centuries ago in Santa Catalina Convent. Arequipa is also a very important farming area. Even though Peru, as all countries in South America, is suffering from drought conditions, thanks to a series of canals that bring necessary water to otherwise arid fields, farmers manage to raise important crops here. The weather in the dry summer months averages 95 degrees, and work is difficult, to say the least. Not far from the lovely city of Arequipa lie the high Andes and El Misti, a dormant volcano that towers above the surrounding area. And the local people say that even though she rests now, you never know when she might come alive to cover the area with tons of lava, as she has so many times over the centuries. A region of great contrasts. The very arid flatlands and the snow-capped mountains not far away. It's an all-day journey from Arequipa to another of Peru's incredible sights, Colca Canyon. Not only is it an all-day journey, but you're likely to remember this excursion as one of the most uncomfortable of your life. Your bus leaves at sunrise. The temperature is about 20 degrees. Even with the sun and blue skies, it's freezing. The buses have little, if any, shock absorbers, and you feel every bump on the gravel rock road. You're liable to see any number of animals, including llamas and alpacas, but forget trying to get a picture of them with your still camera. It's so bumpy, all you'll get is a blur. You've left civilization behind in Arequipa and wonder if you'll ever get back to see it again. Every 50 miles or so, you pass little pueblos, but you won't be stopping. Finally, the midpoint, and what a welcome relief. It isn't much, only a little store, but just to get off that darn bus for a stretch means more than all the gold in the Gold Museum. Enjoy the break while you can, because soon we'll be back on the moving torture rack called a bus to the Colca Canyon. Finally, you'll get a chance to get those pictures of the famous Peruvian animals, but click quickly, because in a minute, we're off for the second half of our 4-hour bus ride. That's 4 hours up and 4 hours back. And watch what you drink. There are no restroom stops along the way. The closer to the canyon, the more signs of life. The route is lined with ruins from settlements left by the Coyahua Indians. On both sides of the valleys, you'll find tremendous pre-Incan farming terraces. Most Inca stonework was practical in nature. The curved lines of agricultural terracing was the answer to the tremendous need for food of a state based on conquest. Built of rough field stone, the terraces sometimes inclined up hills as steeply banked as 60 degrees. These artificial fields were constructed by carrying topsoil and gravel by hand from the richer bottomlands to create a level environment. These terraces were often linked to elaborate canal systems. It's an extraordinary sight. Back on the bus. Oh, remember now, in this part of the world, llamas have the right of way. And you start praying for herds of the creatures just so your bus will stop for a few minutes. Incidentally, these breathless herders drive the flocks for mile after unbelievable mile over the Andes and never seem to show signs of fatigue. Ha! They ought to be on our bus. On the hillsides, you see what look like small caves, but these are actually ancient Indian burial sites, very sacred to the local people. Finally, our destination, Colca Canyon. This is the deepest canyon in the world. It's a vast and incomparable place. And yes, it was worth the suffering to get here. Oh, by the way, there is also a plane trip over the canyon, which I would highly recommend. It's a little more expensive, but a lot more pleasant. You can do the whole thing in less than an hour, compared to the 9 to 12 hours of cruel and unusual punishment on your Colca Canyon bus. If you're lucky, you'll see condors diving into the gorge or just circling above. Our next destination in Peru is the gateway to the Peruvian Amazon country, Iquitos, some 2,000 miles from the mouth of the Amazon River and Atlantic Ocean and almost 1,000 miles from Lima. Iquitos would seem like the most isolated of places. Started as a Jesuit mission of Santa Maria de Iquitos in the 1750s. From 1880 to 1917, Iquitos prospered from the rubber boom as steamers as large as 1,000 tons regularly called from New York and Liverpool. The Grand Hotel Palace was imported from Paris in pieces and reassembled on the banks of the Amazon. Today, Iquitos' 300,000 inhabitants hope for a new boom from oil recently discovered. In the meantime, lumber, orchids, wicker furniture, and medicinal plants are the main exports. Maybe the most picturesque place to visit in this area is the floating village of Belém. About 15,000 people live here, and the only way to visit is, of course, by boat. The village is made up of balsa rafts held in place by long poles. Incidentally, the average rainfall of the Amazon in this region is about 40 feet a year, with the low in September when the floating island doesn't float at all because there's no water. It sits on a bed of mud for a few weeks at this time, but at high tide it's a floating market with little thatched covered huts serving as markets and homes. The whole scene looks like an exotic bazaar. Belém is about 2 miles from Iquitos. There are several interesting, exotic places to hang your hammock in this area of the Amazon. Our destination is the Amazon Lodge, about 90 minutes downstream from Iquitos.
What is this pod?
That's another
Looks like a scene from the African Queen.
Not edible.
But we're not in Africa. We are in Peru. The Amazon Lodge has accommodations for 90 people in thatched roofed huts. It seems like you're about as far from civilization as you can be in this absolutely tranquil place. Guests are greeted with a nice cool drink. And you get your first look at what you've dreamed about for weeks. Your accommodations in the Amazon jungle. And considering where we are, it's pretty darn comfortable. as much or as little as you like. Maybe catching a piranha or two from the balcony of your room. Maybe you'd like to take a canoe tour of the surrounding area. Now, of course, you'll bring a camera or two, and bring lots of mosquito repellent too. You won't see very much in the way of wildlife because actually the camp is too close to civilization. And after all, we aren't on an extended safari. But if you're lucky, you might see more than a wild cockatoo, so keep your eyes open. Whether you find wildlife or not, it is a fascinating look into another world, and just being here is its own reward. I'm sure that a lot of things you see are certainly designed for tourists, but still it's fun to at least think that you've stumbled across all of this by sheer accident. A visit to the public school in Tambapuacar is really an eye-opener. Because of the temperamental rise and fall of the Amazon, the buildings are on stilts. And these schools are not funded by the government. They are dependent solely on private donations. And because the people here, largely Indians, have so little money, it's amazing that these schools exist at all. The books have been handed down through several generations, and it's a real sacrifice for the parents to be able to send their children to these schools. The school day is split, with some attending 4 hours in the morning and others in the late afternoon when the hot, humid temperature starts to give a little relief. And like children everywhere, they know how to have fun. We arrive back in the lodge just in time for dinner. All the food served is from this area. Nothing is brought in, so usually the main course is fish. And there's also a meat entree whose origin I'd rather not speculate about. I'm not sure whether it's the fact that you're really hungry after a long day, but the food is really delicious. Just don't think about what it might be. And don't drink the water. In the evening, you can spend your time relaxing or visiting with some of the local children. One of the main side trips is a visit to an authentic Indian village. And on the way in, you'll find the huge Matasao trees, gigantic, thousands of years old. Nothing like them anywhere else on Earth. And you'll also find thousands of termites living in their mud nests, and yes, they bite. Again, the way that this tour is designed, you're made to feel that you are the first one to go through this jungle in years, and it's very exciting, anticipating the discovery of your Indian village, and finally you arrive, and it's not quite what you'd expect. You're told that on this particular day, most of the men hunters are out hunting. But a couple of braves have stayed home to greet you and maybe even trade some of their handiwork for some of your personal items. Money seems to be especially interesting to them. The Indians are a rather sad sight. Now obviously completely dependent on tourism and reduced to barter cigarettes and coins from the tourists. Well, it's been quite a day. And just like in your dreams, the Amazon sun slowly sinks in the west. And it's time to say so long to the Peruvian Amazon and this part of our journey. Lake Titicaca and the town of Puno lie on the southeast border of Peru. Puno itself isn't noteworthy for very much architecturally. It's 12,500 feet above sea level, and the best look at the town is from Cerro Huaspati, a hill 3 blocks from the main square. You can easily see everything in Puno in less than a day. On the other hand, a very interesting site to visit, 17 miles from Puno on Lake Umago, we find the fascinating area of Siustani. It's a rather steep climb to get where you need to go to see the main sights, but worth the effort. Remember, at this extreme altitude, you really have to move slowly. Local guides will explain to the best of what they've been able to piece together about the mysterious tombs of Siustani. The theory, and it really is all conjecture, is that the chupas, or tombs, were built probably before the Inca conquest of the Coya tribes of the Lake Titicaca region in the 15th century. Some of the tombs are round, some square. They are of adobe or stone, and sometimes a combination of both. One of the mausoleum towers is 40 feet high. When the towers were filled with the cadavers and all the paraphernalia they needed for the next world, including wives and servants, as well as food, drink, money, and clothing, they were closed. Unfortunately for the wives and servants, they joined the dead master on his journey whether they really wanted to go or not. This vast area is another of the countless unsolved mysteries of Peru and its ancient civilizations. It's called Siustani, and it is located above the banks of Lake Umago, about 17 miles from Puno. Another of the most memorable of your journeys in Peru is a visit to the floating islands of the Uros Indians on Lake Titicaca. Lake Titicaca itself is the highest navigable lake in the world, at 12,500 feet above sea level. At the mouth of the Rio Huili, which leads into the lake, the floating islands house tribes of some 400 Uros Indians, a very old lake civilization. The floating islands of Huacavacani are literally floating platforms built from layer upon layer of tortora reeds, the same organic material used for their unique fishing rafts, which we'll sail on a little later for a rather primitive journey on Lake Titicaca. The reeds rot from the bottom, so new layers are continually added on top. The islands are only about 6 inches deep. Be careful where you step. The islands themselves are large enough to accommodate several families, and each island contains small reed huts and plots for potatoes and other tubers, which along with fish make up the skimpy daily diet. The Euros rarely leave their islands, visiting the mainland only on religious occasions. Legend has it that their blood is black, and that's how they are able to tolerate the bitter cold nights on the lake. And the black blood, they say, prevents them from drowning. They have very little contact with the outside world, except for the Adventist missionaries who provide them with a clinic and school, and with the few tourists who venture out to pay them a visit. They sell small replicas of their sailing boats and their weavings. If you do make this trip, I would advise you to buy lots of fruit before you leave Puno. You'll be an instant hit with these very shy people. Now, in my case, I forgot the fruit, but promised them that I would buy a few boxes and have my guide bring the goodies on his next visit. I'm not sure that they bought my story because they didn't seem overly happy with my presents, but true to my word, I sent 5 boxes of oranges the next day. Set me back a good $3, I want you to know. They speak the Aymara language. You will not hear Spanish and certainly not English spoken on these islands. It takes one man 1 week to build one boat. The boat will last about 6 months before deteriorating, and then that one man will take 1 more week to build 1 more boat for another 6 months. Lake Titicaca is an impressive sight. The world's largest high-altitude body of water, some 15 times the size of Lake Geneva in the Swiss Alps, higher and slightly larger than Lake Tahoe. About 10 hours west of Lake Titicaca and 5 hours south of Lima by automobile is the region of Ica. Ica itself is an attractive old city worth visiting and famous for its wine. But even more interesting is the fishing port of San Andres, about 5 miles west of Ica. In San Andres, you can watch the fishermen bringing in their catch of the day. And this is big business here. Actually, more than 4,000 fishermen head out in boats each morning to earn their living from the sea, just as their parents and grandparents did, and as their children and grandchildren will in the future. Thousands of clams, oysters, lobsters, and fish fill the markets here. Now the fish, and you'll be told there are more than 300 different kinds, are cleaned and sold in the fishermen's markets of San Andres, and most are shipped all over the world. I'm not sure how fresh they arrive at their destination, but at least they start out bright-eyed. There is no refrigeration here. This is also a very important part of the youngsters' daily education. They attend school 2 hours in the morning, and the rest of the time they work with their parents in the market. There's also a small farmer's market where the local people sell their produce. The vegetables and fruits are raised nearby on their small Indian farms. And as you can see, they don't do a booming business. And the produce might sit in the hot sun for days before being sold or fed to the animals, whichever comes first. The Paracas Valley is an exceptionally fertile area, which produces corn and cotton. And coffee. Coffee beans are picked while still green, usually in August, then bagged and exported all over the world. Big business. This is the region which produces excellent Peruvian coffee beans. The Inca Valley. 2 hours or so east of Ica is one of the world's strangest, most mysterious places, Nazca. Nazca's relationship to the Incas of Cusco and Machu Picchu has baffled archaeologists for centuries, especially because Nazca is so far from what we now know to be the heart of the Incan civilization. Strange, mysterious drawings in the earth, like the drawing of the monkey, the fishing rod and reel, the condor, and others have stirred imaginations of some of South America's and the world's greatest minds. It's about a 5-hour drive through vast desert regions from Lima to Nazca. You're liable to drive for miles in this road without seeing another sign of life. Then from the tiny airport about 3 miles down the main road south of town, Aero Condor, a small private airline, will take you on a 1-hour flight to offer you the best look of the Nazca lines. The lines are a series of animal figures and geometric shapes, none of them repeated, some of them up to 656 feet in length, drawn across some 193 square miles of the bleak, stony Pampa de San Jose. Each one, even such sophisticated ones as the condor, or the spider monkey, or the hummingbird, is executed in a single continuous line, most often created by clearing away the brush and hard stones of the plain to reveal the fine dust beneath. They were likely a kind of agricultural calendar to help regulate the planting and harvesting of crops. One theory suggests that the lines were used as running tracks in some sort of sporting competition. Whichever theory you like, they are among the strangest and most unforgettable sights in the world. They were made between 600 and 700 A.D. How long it took to construct them is a last inevitable question, and since none of them can be properly seen from the ground, it is tempting to believe they must have taken generations to complete. A few years back, a local school tried building its own lines, and from its efforts, they calculated that a patient and inspired worker could have made them all in less than a month. About 8 hours east and slightly north of Nazca lies perhaps the greatest of all the mysteries of Peru, the area of Cusco, Ollantaytambo, and the great wonder of the world, Machu Picchu. The place to begin your excursion of this fascinating area is the old seat of the Incan Empire, Cusco, called the navel of the world by the Incas. It's a serene sight of red tile when seen from any of the hills surrounding the city, a city of some 200,000. Cusco is a blend of Indian, Spanish, and Mestizo. The city is small enough not to get lost in, but large enough to keep you as busy as you like. There are several hostels and hotels, but only a couple that you might consider first class. Traditionally, tourists have dedicated 2 days and 2 nights to Cusco, first visiting the city, later exploring the Indian ruins on the city's outskirts. Now, if you feel a little queasy in your stomach and headachy when you first arrive, you're not alone. Almost everyone gets a touch of the woozies here. After all, remember, you're more than 12,000 feet up in the clouds. From almost the minute you get to your hotel, you'll find the extremely polite help anxious to make you as comfortable as possible by serving you some coca tea. It's supposed to cure some of the awful effects of altitude sickness, and yes, it is made from the coca leaf. Although cocaine is illegal, the coca leaf is legal and considered very important for medicinal purposes. And you'll need coca tea or something to help you get around the hills of Cusco. It's best to find a local guide if you really want to see all you can in as comfortable and short a time as possible. The guides are very used to accommodating the lowlanders, and they can help when you feel as though you might keel over from the thin air. One of the first of many must-visit places is the site of Santo Domingo Church, actually built on the foundations of the original Incan Temple of the Sun. The church is in Coricancha, which means enclosure of the gold in Indian language. And this church included not only the sun's home, but also that of the moon's mother, the rainbow, the god of thunder and lightning, rain, and the morning star. As far as the Incas were concerned, all of life's forces were housed in this one spot. The enclosure of gold must have been the most impressive group of buildings in the Holy City. Now, let me get back to the coca leaves because they're very interesting. Chewing the coca leaf, a Novocaine-like numbness in the mouth occurs. It's supposed to postpone fatigue, nervousness, and also to suppress the appetite. The Indians chew the leaves to stave off weariness when working. The leaf is held in the cheek like chewing tobacco, and then the exhale is just spit out. It's legal in Peru, but nowhere else. Now, I wanted to try some of the stuff just so that I could tell you what it was like. And it was like chewing bay leaves, but I certainly didn't feel any different than I did before I chewed it. Now, once you get over the extreme altitude, you can start to take some short walks outside the city where you'll meet some of the local Indian residents. Now, they might seem unfriendly, but it is not that they are unfriendly. They are very shy. They live very simple lives. And the entire family, consisting of 2 or 3 generations, all live on the same farm and in one little house. You talk about togetherness. Even the animals share the living quarters with the family. They might have 2 or 3 cows, a few chickens, maybe some sheep, and they raise small potatoes, which supply their principal food source. Even though I am told that these people are very happy, I didn't get that impression. They live a very hard life, but then it's also pointed out it's the only life they know. Meanwhile, back at the coca tasting, I did notice that the flowers were starting to smell awfully good. Our young friend Emilka takes us on a photo tour of the countryside. We get our first close-up look at the workhorse of the Andes, the llama. Now, don't be fooled by that sweet, innocent, lovable face. They can be as ornery as anything, and they love to bite Americans. They spit with deadly aim, too. Now, another one of the many interesting things to do in Cusco is to visit the authentic Indian market. And young Amilca, who is of Indian ancestry, tells us that he thinks he can find the market in Pisac that his parents have told him about. Now, it's supposed to be the most non-tourist market in the area, so after asking directions many times along the way, we finally end up about 25 miles north of the city in the middle of nowhere. And here, in the middle of nowhere, I mean no houses, no cars, nothing, we come across an old woman weaving a rug and selling souvenirs. Now, I can't imagine business being very good. And she tells us we're the first customer she's seen in 2 weeks. I have no idea how or why she selected this place to set up shop, but she proved what the people in Cusco had been telling me. The Indians are very strange and mysterious indeed. Hey, you know what? There is something to this coca leaf stuff after all. I feel like dancing. Your first close-up look of the ancient Incan architecture in this region will be a visit to Sacsayhuaman. It's a fortress begun by the first great conqueror of the known world, Pachacutec, sometime after 1445. 75 years later, it was still under construction during the reign of the last of the pre-conquest Inca, the unfortunate King Huascar. Sacsayhuaman is an incredible heap of engineered masonry, and before its destruction by the Spaniards, who used it as a quarry for the stone needed to build Cusco, it was the most wondrous building in the whole of the Incan Empire, and they believed in the world at that time. How they knew about the rest of the world is another of the unanswered mysteries that surround the Incan civilization. Finally, after several interesting sidetracks and asking lots of directions, we find our Indian market at Pisac. We were told that we wouldn't see any tourists here because only the locals knew how to find this place. Obviously, word leaked out somehow because I found as many tourists here as I found in Cusco. I asked one fella how in the world he found this place. It took me 8 hours to get to, and he said, well, you know, it wasn't that hard. I simply went to the tour desk at my hotel. They told me to look for the bus that had the sign that said Authentic Indian Market, and I made it here in about 25 minutes on an air-conditioned bus. And it took me 8 hours. Well, maybe it wasn't really 8 hours. Maybe the coca leaves just made it seem that long. The Indian market is as colorful a place as you'll find anywhere. The Indian farmers meet in this open-air spot every Sunday, rain or shine. Portable kitchens and even bakeries are set up only to be dismantled at the end of the day. Produce and animals are mostly bartered because the people don't have much in the way of cash. Matter of fact, the little money that passes hands comes from the tourists who haunt the market looking for bargains. And bargains there are. In the Indian market, the authentic Indian market at Pisac. There, beyond those mountains, beyond the valleys, there, in the Peruvian Andes, lie the most dramatic and enchanting of all the Inca citadels, Machu Picchu, our most anticipated destination of all. Of all the incredible things to see in Peru, Machu Picchu is the culmination, the height of your entire journey. By now you've gotten used to the altitude, and even though you'll never move at the speed of the locals, at least you'll begin to enjoy what you've come all this way to experience. If it's all right with you, I'll just take a little break. You talk about the straw that broke the burro's back. Oh, my aching back. These burros aren't lazy at all. They're just taking a little break because they have a long, steep journey ahead, and so do we. The long, narrow, winding road drops into the sacred valley known as Urubamba, the Valley of the Spiders. It's still easy to see why the Incas considered this a special place. Even though farming in the fertile valley is as primitive as you'll find anywhere, the Urubamba supplies the marketplaces of Cusco with vegetables and grains enough to last through the winter. The great fortress of Ollantaytambo is about 45 miles from Cusco. It is one of the few Inca towns distinctively Inca and still inhabited. The fortress is one of the dozen or more places in Peru that starts you dreaming about the great Incan empire that was Tahuantinsuyu and flourished unknown to the rest of the world so many centuries ago. The ruins here include temples, baths, and military defenses. Finally, Ollanta, the last train stop on the way to Machu Picchu. There isn't much to Ollanta. It's a little train depot built next to the Urubamba River. As you can well imagine, people travel from all over the world to see for themselves what they've only read about, and now they're almost there. This is an adventurers club from Hawaii. Each year, they travel to a different area of the world to enjoy their principal activity, whitewater rafting. Now, this club has maneuvered down some of the most treacherous rivers in the world, and they'll try their skills today on the Urubamba. They say it isn't nearly as hazardous as they thought it would be. And they'll ride about 25 miles to a tiny depot by the river. Then they'll pack up and catch the tourist train to Machu Picchu. We'll meet them in about an hour. Our train should be here any minute. The narrow gauge railroad leaves Cusco's San Pedro station each day at 7 a.m. It stops in Ollanta about 2 hours later and waits here for an hour to take the locals who work up and around Machu Picchu to their jobs. The train passes through the beautiful sacred valley of the Incas. The trip to Machu Picchu is striking and full of scenic contrasts. And try to sit by a left-hand window and be prepared for rain from December to March. But even in the rain, it's a ride filled with wonder and anticipation of your final destination, Machu Picchu. Mile after beautiful mile unfolds on your 2-hour train ride to Agua Caliente Station. Actually, there are 2 trains daily that venture to the base of Machu Picchu. One is the regular local, and the other, the tourist train. Many are tempted to take the local because it's less expensive than the tourist train, but be warned, it's very dangerous for tourists. There are several unsavory types who take this train with the sole intent of preying on the innocent visitor. I personally heard many horror stories about people who had been victimized by thieves on this train. Besides, the local train is slower and very crowded. Believe me, it just isn't worth the few dollars you'll save for the trouble you might buy. The tourist train arrives at Machu Picchu station at 10:30 a.m. and the one and only return trip is 3 p.m. that same afternoon. So you'll have about 3 unrushed hours to visit the ruins. If you can, get reservations at the Turista Hotel just outside the citadel of Machu Picchu, where you can relax and really enjoy your stay. The Turista Hotel has only 31 fare rooms and only fare food, but it's the only show in town, and just steps away from the entrance to Machu Picchu. And if you stay overnight, you can visit the citadel in the late afternoon and have it almost to yourself after everyone else has gone back to Cusco. There's something very special about being in Machu Picchu with as few people as possible. After all, you've traveled a long way to get here, so enjoy. While you're looking at the sights on our train ride, let me give you a little background about what you'll soon be seeing in person. For hundreds of years, the legendary site of Machu Picchu was lost and forgotten except by local Indians and settlers. It was finally rediscovered by the North American explorer Hiram Bingham in 1911. He'd heard of a local farmer who supposedly knew of some ancient ruins. Bingham, after exhausting searches, finally found this man, and together they discovered a previously unheard of Inca city which was to become the most famous ruins in all of South America. Although we still don't know for sure, the city was probably conceived and maybe even partly built in the 15th century by the Emperor Pachacuti, the first to expand the Incan Empire beyond the Sacred Valley. You must remember that to the Inca, crop fertility, mountains, and nature were sacred parts of their culture, and in Machu Picchu, they would construct an incredible shrine to practice their beliefs. This, at least, was one of the many theories. Agua Calientes is the railroad station for Machu Picchu itself, and buses headed on up the road over the river to the ruins themselves run twice a day, once up and once back. If you miss the bus, be prepared for a tough hike up. Another way, if you're an experienced, brave hiker to get to the ruins, is to follow the old Inca Trail. It's a 3-day hike and not to be considered by any but the very, very athletic. This is the way that its U.S. discoverer, Hiram Bingham, got there, on foot. You take the train from Cusco to kilometer 88 and walk the next 10 miles on the Inca Trail. Carefully walk along the Inca Trail. On the way, you'll find huge rocks that were never quite completely split by the Incan builders. What these boulders were to be used for is unknown. For whatever reason, they lie along the Inca Trail and serve no apparent purpose. And then, your first breathtaking look at Machu Picchu. Surrounded by high clouds. Nothing written in the Spanish chronicles, which depended upon the oral histories of the Indians, prepares you for this dramatically isolated city of the Inca, unseen by the Occidental eye for centuries. Here you can see the Intihuatani, or stone sundial, as well as the Condor stone, where sacrifices were made. Again, the theories about the city are varied, but each one, though somewhat romantic in detail, is basically sound in itself. It could have been one fortress in a chain of fortresses erected by the Inca to protect the jungle flanks of the empire from savages who made sporadic raids into the national territory. It could have been a great religious sanctuary administered by a group of chosen women of the sun, for the skeletons of mainly women have been found in its burial places. It could have been a training school for the noble youth of the empire. It probably was the last way station for the final Inca ruler and his nobles as they escaped from the Spaniards into what appears to be an impenetrable hideaway. All we know is that Machu Picchu is an unforgettable adventure. In all, Machu Picchu covers an area of approximately 2 square miles, about 250 small and large dwellings within its perimeters. The total population was estimated to be 1,000 inhabitants, of which 75% appear to have been women. Today, the official population is 3, an alpaca, a vicuña, and a llama. Most likely, you will never experience anything quite like Machu Picchu as you let your imagination take you back 500 years when nobles, priests, and temple women gathered here in the Incan holy sanctuary in the nearly inaccessible canyon of Urubamba. Dwarfed by the rising peak of Huayna Picchu. ancient, incredibly beautiful, lost city of the Incas, Machu Picchu, the greatest of all the great mysterious journeys in Peru.